Alright, hello everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in to my astrology video about the full moon in Scorpio. This will be happening tomorrow, May 17th at 5:11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And so, yeah, this is definitely a moon that's being felt in the days prior for sure. It's a super concentrated and potent, intense feeling, pressure building with this full moon. So I'm excited to dig into all of that. I apologize for missing the new moon in Taurus video. It's the first one I've missed in quite a long time, and I just needed that day. So I'm probably going to talk a little bit about what that new moon in Taurus was about as well in this video. That's sort of like helped us set the stage for where we're at right now with this full moon in Scorpio. So, yeah, there's lots of change going on right now. This is definitely a time of major transformations. It's been that way for a little bit after that sort of double full moon, Libra double full moon, lots of upheaval and change in relationships, in different areas of our lives, depending on where in your chart Libra falls and what kind of planets we're interacting in that area. But yeah, definitely lots of discomfort, lots of change, and we've had Uranus moving through Taurus now for a little bit, and Uranus will be in Taurus for 7 years. So Uranus is coming into this sort of shaking up our roots, really. Like, I was thinking the other day, transplanting some plants, like when you lift up the roots, like we're just like do and plopping them down somewhere else, and like the traumatic experience for those roots of sort of coming out of this smaller container and like dangling in the air and then being plopped down into what will ultimately be more fertile, more spacious growing area for the little growing plants. Taurus is sort of like that safety net, that safe space, the things that are solid, that are predictable in their materiality, where, relationships can be, there's such different kinds of change happens in lots of different areas of our lives, and Taurus is sort of like, what are the things that are our pillars? What are the things that, like, we really define ourselves with, that are our values, that keep us feeling, that sort of are an important part of who we are on a pretty fundamental level, at a fundamental, like, operating mode. And so, yeah, having Uranus in Taurus is definitely coming in and shaking things up and breaking down structures that aren't working for us anymore, and kind of in a very real, concrete, material way, bringing in lots of change. And this can be like sudden, sort of abrupt, chaotic kind of change. And so, yeah, definitely a general undertone of this time more recently and for the next 7 years. And I think the new moon in Taurus was sort of just like the start of kind of like, how do we engage with this chaotic energy in this part of ourselves and part of our lives that is really important for our survival, and how do we evolve and expand when we need to and when is necessary. And that's usually by moving out of our comfort zone. And so Scorpio is out of our comfort zone. It's like the taboo, the things that we don't, that are just pushing it maybe a little bit. And so I just want to remind folks that when I'm doing these reports, if your sun is in Scorpio and you are a Scorpio, I'm not specifically talking about you with these qualities. Like, I think I do talk about different qualities of different signs in these videos, but especially when I'm talking about things in like negative ways, I don't want people to feel like I'm talking negatively about who you are. If it is really stirring up something up for you, then maybe it is an important sort of challenge of working with that sign. But yeah, so small digression there. But so Scorpio is moving out of our comfort zones, moving going deeper, like getting to, you know, we've been dealing with a lot of anger and frustration and agitation or restlessness with this kind of energy of what's been going on and this change. Scorpio is sort of getting to the bottom of like, okay, those feelings, frustration, anger, irritability, restlessness, like those are all kind of surface level emotions. And so another massive change that we've just had happen is Mars, planet of action, the planet of conflict, the planet of, I just think of rage, like how do we process through rage and how do we use that as like a motivating an impetus in our lives, injustice, things that stir us up when things are not okay or have violated something for us, and that sort of flare up happens. That's kind of how I think of Mars. And Mars has just moved into Cancer, and Mars is going to be in I don't know how long Mars is in Cancer, maybe a month and a half. I don't think it has any big retrogrades coming up for a while, so I think it'll probably be about a month and a half in Cancer, and it's a very bizarre place for Mars to be. And so right now also Mars is in a sextile, which is this sort of like supportive aspect with Uranus in Taurus. And Mars in Cancer is just like so really raw and like fierce emotions, and raw and fierce vulnerability is how I think of it. But it can also be defensive and sort of like these, like Cancer, when I think of the sign of Cancer, I often think of like my emotions, where Scorpio is like our emotions, or this sort of like place where lines are blurry between self and other, and also sort of brings in different kinds of things with the subconscious there, though Cancer also has to do with that as well. And then Pisces is like everyone's emotions. So when I think of Cancer, I think of like, my sun is in Cancer and I have planets in Cancer, and so I relate a lot with these kind of feeling of like when I'm getting upset, this like flushed, I think Aries can probably relate to this too, this sort of like flush of emotion like into the chest and the face, and sort of like discomfort and anger, very reactive. It can be reactive, and so that is definitely something that we'll be working through with all of this. But I mean, in its most kind of positive and empowering way, in this sextile with Uranus, it's just like so fierce and so raw and so just like ripped open. And so yeah, with the moon in Scorpio, sort of this full moon in Scorpio sort of illuminating, having us look at and examine our most like vulnerable and raw kinds of parts of who we are. Like, what are the fears? Oh yeah, back to kind of that idea around that restlessness and anger and those and so anger being something that maybe rises up really quickly at this time, especially with Mars now moving into Cancer. So all these sort of surface level emotions. The full moon this full moon in Scorpio is asking us to get down to the root system of that. Like, what am I actually afraid of? Like, what are my deepest fears that I don't actually want to look at and want to address? Because this last few months, I think, has been a lot of sort of like putting off naming or sort of like pulling out the really kind of tender, with the Mars in Cancer, really tender, really kind of personal, and with Scorpio, it's like, what part of ourselves do we hate, like, who are we, like, we need to name that to sort of like turn the ship around, or, start interacting in a different way with those parts of ourselves, because they're who we are. And so, yeah, this can be a really empowering moment of like, that's what I'm afraid of, actually, and I'm not afraid to say the thing out loud or write the thing down. And yeah, we've also got Mercury in Taurus. We've got Venus, Mercury, Uranus, and the Sun all in Taurus. So this is like heavy, concentrated time. It's so sensual. Taurus is like super sensual, super earthy, and with this, at least today, beautiful weather, it's sort of this really tender, like reconnecting with the earth time, really in the body. It almost feels like slowed down and spread out, which can be, I think, really pleasurable and enjoyable. And yeah, Venus is in her home sign in Taurus. It could be a super beautiful sort of flourishing time for relationships and for different things that are going on. But yeah, this full moon is providing us with an opportunity to like do that work in a really real and honest way. So yeah, that's a lot of cool stuff that's going on. We've also still got this situation going on in Capricorn, which we have been for a while, and we'll continue with the Pluto and Saturn and South Node of the Moon little crew. The South Node of the Moon is now moving away more quickly than Saturn and Pluto move. But Saturn and Pluto are hanging out for a while in these sort of around 20 degrees of Capricorn, and that's really heavy and intense and serious. Like, what are you actually doing with your life? Like, it's a pretty raw kind of like, are you being accountable? Are you being authentic? Are you saying what you, like, step up, do the thing, take ownership, take leadership in your life? And yeah, like, what is your what are you doing here while you're here? And it's kind of intimidating and intense. And so that's in the mix with this whole full moon situation. I think that it can be a really cathartic time if it's possible to get to the bottom of some of this stuff and bring it up and love it. That's Mars in Cancer, like love directed at love as the impetus for action. Like, yeah, that this can be a really powerful time of sort of like, I'm picturing sort of just like cracking your chest down the middle and just being like, like going for it. And yeah, there can be things coming up that we don't want to look at and we don't want to deal with and we don't want to see. And if we continue, it's not a good time to just keep shoving things down. It's just going to keep coming up. So yeah, and then yeah, I wanted to pull some cards, but they're over on the floor, so I'm going to go grab those. So another just little piece too with all of this, with this Uranus engaging and all of this chaos of kind of like letting our systems and structures that we have in our life sort of like deteriorate and fall apart and kind of make way for ones that are actually going to work. Yeah, I think Scorpio also invites us to kind of like look at like what are our weird like cycles and patterns of behavior and sort of like dark underbellies of things we don't want to get into, or obsessive kinds of things, and like how do we also kind of find pleasure in that, in those like cycles of desire and sort of the drama and the grandness of what that can be about. So I think there's also kind of this moment of like, okay, are we actually ready now to stop that thing that we do that keeps us entertained and kind of shift into patterns that are going to be really more aligned with our truth. This is the action going on in Capricorn and the Pisces, the Neptune in Pisces. Like, how are we going to align with our truth to be here in a really authentic way? So yeah, those are just some other thoughts. Alright, I'm going to pull a few cards and we'll see what comes up to help us understand a little more about this full moon. Okay. Whoa. Okay. Wow! This is just like, woo! overworked, overpressured, lots of pressure, all sort of kind of crumbling down in trying to move too fast, do too much. And it's just like, whoa, slow down a little. Stop spinning wheels just for the sake of spinning wheels. It's 5 of Swords. Yeah, this is like looking at our stuff that really hurts or doesn't feel good. This can also just be like big, explosive, kind of angry things that might happen at this time, and feelings being hurt at words that are harsh or loaded, you know. This is the Mars and Cancer sort of piece. And then, or we can be calm, cool, and collected. So the Pentacle Mother, this makes me think a lot about the Saturn and Pluto conjunction going on, and just like, or we can be in our power and feel really good and be sort of growing and be standing up for ourselves in a real way, like really being there for showing up for ourselves, which means dealing with our shit, showing up for community, which also means dealing with our shit. So yeah, that's really awesome. So I think it's like a multiple realities kind of situation. Like if, you know, this really potent sort of cathartic release can be embodied, or it can be sort of like put off, and yeah, there's sort of this exhausting and painful kind of stuff that can happen if we're not, yeah, showing up for ourselves in a real way. So, alright, I think that'll do it for today. This was really, really fun for me, so I hope y'all enjoyed, and if you're interested in a birth chart reading to learn about how this impacts you, feel free to reach out to me, and you can reach me via Facebook Messenger, or you can email me at thefoolandthechariot@gmail.com. Alright, take care everyone, love you so much, bye-bye!